Welcome back to another episode of the Fearless Society podcast. Tonight we are continuing our season on spiritual disciplines, and we're going to be talking all about hospitality. So let's get into it.
You're listening to the Fearless Society podcast, and we're building a community of fearless Christians who boldly live out the call that God has placed in our lives. We aren't afraid to talk about who we are and what we believe. Following Jesus today isn't easy, but it is worth it. And our goal is to come alongside you as we encourage and equip each other to live boldly and fearlessly, because a fearless church begins with us. Together, we are the Fearless Society.
So before we begin talking about hospitality, what was your favorite subject in school?
I don't think I had a favorite subject. I wasn't that get me out of here, I hate school altogether, but I definitely had favorite teachers rather than favorite subjects. Like my US history teacher, hands down best teacher in the whole school. My math teacher, my junior year of high school, was the most amazing woman ever. And honestly made me feel like I actually knew what I was doing, and was super encouraging and super easygoing. And so I liked the classes that I liked the teachers. The teachers really made, and I just didn't enjoy school. I didn't like reading. I didn't like learning. I didn't like I wasn't this A student, or I wasn't this super bright, passing all my classes and everything. I didn't like learning until college.
Yeah. Good teachers.
So maybe Bible.
Good teachers do make all the difference, for sure. They can really change a student's perspective on a subject and really on their outlook on life and everything. It can really make a huge difference to have a good teacher. Yeah. I was homeschooled from first grade all the way through 12th grade.
So you have to like your teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing is I did. So that was good. No, I always enjoyed math for the most part. I understood it and it made sense to me, and I liked that there was clear cut right and wrong answers. And yeah.
That's the difference between you and us. You and us. I'm an us, okay? You and I. My brain's not working tonight. It's you really like the math, and this is the right answer. And I'm a little bit too creative for math. Math was so hard.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. And I did when I got to my senior year and I was taking basic calculus stuff, that was tough. Because at that point I was pretty much self-taught, so to speak, from the books and stuff like that. And that was just the concepts were much more difficult to grasp, and it was much more challenging
to teach yourself.
Yeah. And some of that challenge I enjoyed, but it did get old after a while. So yeah. Then my senior year, I also took a video course for science, and I took a physics class, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. I didn't like biology at all. I thought I was going to love chemistry, and I did not at all.
Really?
But physics was, I loved physics class.
I didn't take physics, but out of the sciences, I think I liked biology the best. But it definitely was not. I liked all of the extracurricular activities after school ended. I liked going to dance class. I liked, going and playing on the worship team. I liked all of those creativity, movement things. A couple weeks that I spent on color guard, that was fun. And then we moved, so I didn't get to keep going. But Yeah, just the sitting in a classroom and learning in the classroom, just, I don't know, didn't care for it.
Of course, that's half the reason I love being homeschooled, because if I got up on time and started I could be done by lunchtime easy and have the rest of the day to just do fun stuff or go to work with my dad or do whatever. It was great. So.
Yeah. So, well, let's get into hospitality.
Yeah.
What comes to your mind when you think of the word hospitality?
A hospital.
What?
Hospital, hospitality.
Okay.
Anyway, that's that may not be the first thing that comes to my mind, but I do think that my mind thinks of that in that way. And I think that it's not so much in that, sick people go to hospitals, but that in hospitals, people are cared for and taken care of. And I think that that's really at the root of hospitality, is caring for people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that looks like helping sick people get better, and sometimes it looks like something totally different. But yeah, I think that hospitality for me comes down to caring about people, caring about their needs, and doing what's in your power to serve their needs and meet their needs.
Yeah. I think it's funny because when I think of hospitality, I think of like in the church world, like if you make coffee, boom, hospitality is your gift. Like, and if you're a greeter, you're part of the hospitality team. If you can cook, you're cooking for every church function from here until eternity. And so they're just different things that we label in the church world as hospitality. And sometimes I sit there and I'm like, but that's not really what hospitality is. Like, how is making coffee hospitality? And then I have to stop and be like, no, you're right. Like, when you walk in a church and there's coffee available, you're cared, like you feel cared for because you feel like somebody saw your needs. When you see a smiling face when you walk through the door and not like nothingness, like that first smiling face you see when you walk in a church, like all of a sudden you're like, wow, like there's people, like, and they see me and they care. And so those little tiny things that we label hospitality ministry, all add up over time. But I think you're right. Like hospitality is about caring for people, and hospitality, there's a really big emphasis on how we love other people in hospitality. But my favorite definition of hospitality actually I was reading The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield. And she's got like her PhD in English. So she's an amazing, amazing author, amazing writer. But she said that like hospitality is welcoming the stranger in. It's not just about making a meal and having your friends over, but it's the process by which we welcome the stranger in. And so if you're thinking about like, a hospital, you're welcoming strangers in to care for them, or, greeters or coffee makers or cooks or, whoever's part of your hospitality team as a church, like their role within the body within a Sunday morning is to welcome the stranger in and to help them to be comfortable. And it's through hospitality, that welcoming of the stranger, that the gospel is able to go forth. Because when people are comfortable and their guards are down and they're not on edge wondering if people care about them or anything, then they can see so much easier how God cares about them.
Yeah. And I do think you can take some things too far, but I remember being in college, and one of the things we did is we did youth ministry. We were involved in the youth ministries at the church that we were based out of, and they really, our directors, and our director was also the youth pastor, really instilled a sense of excellence in that you do everything that you do it well and with excellence. And I remember we had quite a few kids that came out in an old building surrounded by a cemetery, and And there was, so pickup got interesting. And so they had the back drive behind the church divided into 2 lanes with cones. And when we would set the cones out, it was like stressed on us that you set the cones out straight, because when parents come to pick up their kids, that's the thing they're going to see. Most of those parents never stepped foot inside the building. And if we just toss out some cones willy-nilly, it looks like we don't care. And if we don't care about the cones, what else do we not care about? And I think you can take that too far. There's a point where you start like focusing on all these like nitpicky details, and you actually start missing caring about people. But I do think there's a sense that, when we care about people's needs in the small things, like making coffee, making sure, our building's clean, different things like that in the church world, that matters and shows people that we care. And then I think too, when it comes to just our personal lives, that, those little things really speak volumes to people sometimes.
And they add up too.
Yeah.
Like it might seem little, but all of those little things, like every drop of water eventually works towards filling an entire bucket full,
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you don't get the opportunity to show people that you care in big ways, but you do have lots of small opportunities to show them that you care.
Yeah.
And if you can take advantage of those small opportunities, over time, you begin to build trust with people, and that gives you greater opportunities to care for them and to be a witness to them of what Christ has done in our lives. So,
yeah. So why don't we get into some Bible verses about hospitality? And I told you something that I had found earlier, and it's really interesting. There's 3 to 5, depending on how you count, passages in Scripture that talk about hospitality, and all of them, with the exception of 2 being 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, have to do, they're in a passage that talks about loving people, like loving others. And so it's really interesting. It just highlights again, like we could pull these verses out of context, but in context, like hospitality is a part of loving others. It's a part of loving the body. It's a part of loving your community, and it's a part of loving Christ and allowing the gospel to come through your life to shine into somebody else's. And so the first passage we have is Romans 12. And this one's really interesting because going through the entire chapter, we tend to break this chapter up and talk about little pieces at a time. But when we read the full chapter together, it puts all of those little pieces in context and really weaves them together so perfectly. So Romans 12, a lot of us know verse 1. I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. And so we start off the whole chapter with this idea that like we are a living sacrifice, and we are not being conformed to the world, but we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind so that we know what the will of God is, his good and pleasing and perfect will. Like all of these things come through our living sacrifice of our life and the renewing of our mind. Paul goes on right from that. He goes right into talking about spiritual gifts in the body and how we all have gifts that benefit each other, that build each other up. We don't have the same function, but we should use our gifts in whatever way we can to help other people, to affect other people, to together build up the body of Christ. Then we get into this section where it talks about hospitality. And the title of my Bible, and I really like this, is Marks of the True Christian. So we pick up in verse 9. It says, let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. And he continues on, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony. He goes on from there. But the idea of showing hospitality is put in the middle of this description on what a true Christian life looks like. A true Christian life looks like showing hospitality. And so in a spiritual discipline sense, as we practice inviting the stranger in, as we practice caring for people and doing life with them, we are displaying that true Christian identity, that true life and love of Christ.
That's so good.
You want to take the next one?
Sure. So this is comes from 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 7 through 10. The end of all things is near. Therefore, be of sound judgment and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. Above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaint. As each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Yeah, and I think it's so important that as believers that we're using what God has given us to serve one another. And I think this goes back. I mean, this seems to be so connected to the heart of God, because you think about even when God called Abraham, and part of God's promise to Abraham was that he would bless Abraham and that Abraham and his offspring would become a blessing to all nations. And so that seems to kind of in many ways be this recurring theme of Scripture, that God blesses us in order for us to be a blessing to other people. And so all of the good things that God has blessed us with, I think it's incumbent upon us to find ways to bless other people with those things. And I don't think that should be a thing that like stresses us out, that we're like always worried about how we're gonna be serving other people. I think that God will provide all those opportunities for us to walk in, but we haven't been given things to hoard them for ourselves.
Right.
We haven't been given gifts so that we can put them on display and be praised for the gifts that God has given us. We haven't been given, positions of responsibility. Maybe you're a church leader, or maybe you're a lay leader in your church, or anything like that. And those positions have not been given to us for us to take advantage of them or lord our position over people or anything like that. Those positions have been given so that we can serve people and pass along that blessing and lift people up. And, and so I think it's just so important that we remember these words, right? To outdo one another in showing honor.
I love again, just in these few short verses. It's like, keep fervent in your love for one another, show hospitality or be hospitable to one another without complaint, and use your gifts to serve one another. Like those three things have gone hand in hand in almost every passage on hospitality. And like you said, whether you're serving in a minor role in your church, you're just serving in a ministry, whether you're leading a ministry, whether you're a pastor leading a church or a leader of an organization or anything like that, like these things are part of what that looks like. I thought it was really interesting that Paul in both 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1, he's listing out the qualifications for overseers or elders. And one of those qualifications is that they are hospitable. that they are welcoming to other people, that they're bringing people in and helping them to be comfortable and helping them to find their place. And so hospitality is a huge part of the Christian life. And if you aspire to be a leader, whether it's within the church or outside the church, I think hospitality in that characteristic of this loving, welcoming, friendly person that changes the atmosphere of the rooms that they're in. Like we've met people like that who you walk into a room and you know exactly who in that room is the most welcoming person and the most kind and the friendly. Like these are beneficial things, not just for the church. And these are things that we're not just called to practice and just check off the box, but these are things that actually have this benefit, not just for our lives and the joy of serving others, but for other people in any context, that you then have this influence with other people, and not to wield it for your benefit. But if you're showing hospitality, you have the influence of love and kindness and compassion and welcoming and friendliness with other people that allows you to display the gospel that much more clearly.
I think it's interesting to me. I was just thinking as you were talking that, and maybe this is just my perspective, but I feel like sometimes hospitality gets thought of as like a feminine trait. And it's like, oh, women are hospitable. But this is, as you were saying, in terms of qualifications for elders, this is a mark of of a mature Christian, man or woman.
Right.
And it's something that we should all be striving for. And I also think that it really is hospitality starts in your heart. You can do all of the right actions of hospitality and not be a hospitable person. And I can tell you that I've been on the receiving end of that. And not necessarily like in terms of, I'm not thinking of anything specific in the church, but I've been to events that were, kind of fancy, kind of uppity, and you walk in and everything's taken care of and everything's provided and there's great
the
food
quote unquote
and there's
hospitality team has done their job
to
really
a T,
well.
And everything's perfect, but you just don't really feel like anybody cares about you, and on the flip side, you can walk into somebody's home very humble with barely anything to offer and just feel cared for. And so this is hospitality has to begin in the heart. There's all sorts of actions that you can do to help express what's in your heart. But if your heart's not there, it's not true hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes too, if your heart's not there, then usually that hospitality seems to be self-serving on the part of who's offering it. You think about going to like an event for like a timeshare place, and they just roll out the red carpet for you, but it's all in
their interest,
right? All in their interest. And, and so true hospitality has to begin in the heart, and it's a sign of a mature Christian.
Yeah. And I think, we were talking last week about fellowship and we said that, more can happen in messy living rooms and dining room tables than will happen in a church service, because hospitality along with fellowship, like they kind of go a little bit hand in hand, but hospitality opens the door and welcomes strangers in. It brings people in and provides an avenue for people to be discipled and for you to walk with them. It's not like evangelism and then discipleship. Like I love this, the concept, and I forget where I first heard it, but this discipling people to Christ and walking with them to that decision. And then through that decision onward. And hospitality that opening and that welcoming of the stranger in oftentimes is the first place that starts. That ability to disciple someone and walk them through and lead them to the throne room and lead them to the cross and the gospel usually starts with having a welcoming and open heart and love. And we're kind of running out of time here, so we'll keep it pretty short. But I just wanted to end on Hebrews 13, verse 2, that says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it." And I love that idea. Just that, like, don't neglect showing hospitality. And the idea that, like, some people have entertained angels without even knowing it, because their hearts are so welcoming and loving and benevolent and kind that they draw people in, and they're not thinking of, oh, this is an angel, or this is this great person, or this is this, it's just legitimately this heart that longs to serve and longs to love and longs to welcome people in. And I think that heart only comes through knowing Christ and communion and fellowship with Christ. So all of the spiritual disciplines that we have covered so far feed into our ability to practice a spiritual discipline of hospitality well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope this encourages you to begin practicing greater hospitality in your life. If you've enjoyed it, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, hit the like button. We hope that you'd subscribe so that you can always catch the new episodes, and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you.